The wind howled across the Wyoming plains like a wounded animal, driving sheets of snow that stung like needles. It was late January 1887, and the temperature had dropped so low that the creek behind Colt Remington's ranch house had frozen solid days earlier. Colt, a man of 34 with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much, sat by the fire in the main room, staring into the flames. The ranch was modest, a low log cabin, a barn barely holding against the wind, and a few head of cattle huddled in the shelter of a rocky outcrop. He lived alone, had for 6 years now, ever since the army discharged him after the ambush that took his younger brother Asher. Asher. The name still cut deep. Colt had been a cavalry lieutenant then, leading a patrol through the Badlands when the orders came. Change course, head into the narrow canyon. It was a trap. Bullets from hidden positions above. Screams, the smell of gunpowder and blood. Asher took a round to the chest. Colt carried him out, but it was too late. The official report called it enemy action. Colt called it betrayal. He quit the army, bought this isolated spread with his mustering out pay, and swore never to wear a uniform again. A thud against the door jolted him from memory. Not wind, something heavier. He rose, grabbed the Winchester from above the mantel, and cracked the door open. Snow swirled in, and there she was. A woman collapsed on the porch boards, half buried already, her dark cloak crusted with ice. One gloved hand clutched a leather satchel to her chest like a lifeline. Blood stained the snow beneath her left shoulder, dark and spreading. Colt didn't hesitate. He set the rifle aside, knelt, and lifted her. She was light, too light, shivering violently, even in unconsciousness. Her face was pale, lips blue, but her breathing was steady, shallow, but there. He carried her inside, kicked the door shut, and laid her on the rug near the hearth. The firelight revealed more. A young woman, perhaps 28, with auburn hair matted under a wool hood, high cheekbones, and a determined set to her jaw even in faint. He worked quickly. He fetched clean linens from the chest, a bottle of whiskey for disinfectant, and his medical kit, remnants from army days. Cutting away the sodden sleeve of her dress revealed a bullet graze, deep enough to bleed freely, but not through and through. No bone shattered, thank God. He cleaned it with whiskey. Ignoring her weak flinch, packed it with clean cloth and bound it tight. Then he wrapped her in blankets and eased her onto the narrow cot he kept for rare visitors. She murmured something as he worked, words slurred by cold and pain. He leaned closer. "Don't let them." "Asher. Find Asher." Colt froze. The name hit like a slug to the gut. Asher, his brother, dead 6 years. No one out here knew that name, not the way she said it, with such desperate familiarity. He sat back on his heels, staring at her. Who was she? How did she know Asher? And who were they? He checked the satchel, locked with a small brass clasp. Heavy. He didn't open it, not yet. Instead, he stoked the fire higher, set a kettle to boil for broth, and pulled a chair close to watch her. The storm raged outside, sealing them in. No one would come looking tonight, not in this weather. Whatever trouble followed her, it would have to wait until morning. Hours passed, the fire crackled. She stirred once or twice, mumbling incoherently, names he didn't recognize, fragments about codes and letters. Colt brewed coffee for himself, black and strong, and sipped it slowly. His mind raced. Asher had written him often during the war, letters full of wry humor and coded references. Only the two of them understood. Childhood games turned into signals. If this woman carried something from Asher, it might explain the ambush, the betrayal Colt had always suspected but could never prove. Near dawn, the wind eased. She opened her eyes, green, sharp, despite the fever glaze, and focused on him. Panic flashed across her face. She tried to sit up, winced and clutched the bandage. "Easy," Colt said, voice low and steady. "You're safe. Bullets out, wounds clean. Name's Colt Remington." She studied him a long moment, as if measuring truth against lies. Then, barely above a whisper, "Asher Remington was your brother." It wasn't a question. Colt's jaw tightened. "Was. He's been dead 6 years." "I know." Her voice cracked. "He sent me to you." She reached for the satchel with her good hand. Colt didn't stop her. She fumbled the clasp open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, a bundle of letters. She pulled one free, unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. Asher's looping script. Colt took the page. His pulse hammered. The letter began with innocuous pleasantries, then shifted into the cipher he and Asher had invented as boys, substituting words from their favorite adventure tales. He read silently. The hawk circles twice before the strike. The fox in blue uniform sells the path. Trust no major with a scar above the left eye. Deliver to sea if I fall. The fox in blue, Lieutenant Gaines, who had given the fatal order that day. Scar above the left eye. Gaines had one from an old saber cut. Colt's hands shook. He looked up at her. Who are you? Margot Ellis. She swallowed. I was a field nurse with the 7th Cavalry. Asher was wounded once, nothing serious, but we talked. He trusted me. When he suspected treason, officers selling routes to raiders for profit, he wrote everything down. Gave me these letters the night before the ambush. Told me if he didn't come back, find you. Said you'd know what to do. Colt stared at the paper, then at her. Why now? 6 years? I ran. They found out I had the letters. Gaines, he's out of the army now, but he has friends. Powerful ones. I hid for years, moved from town to town. Last month, they tracked me to Cheyenne. I barely got away. Came here because Asher said this ranch was your sanctuary. No one would look for me in the middle of nowhere. She paused, eyes searching his. I didn't expect you'd still be alone, or that you'd look so much like him. Colt set the letter down. Emotions warred inside him. Grief renewed, anger long buried, and something else. Purpose. For the first time in years, the emptiness felt like it might have an end. You need rest, he said finally. Wounds not infected, but you're weak. Stay as long as it takes to heal, no questions for now. She nodded, relief softening her features. Thank you. He stood, added wood to the fire. Outside, the storm had quieted to a gentle fall of flakes. Inside, the cabin felt smaller, warmer, alive with secrets that had waited too long to be spoken. Colt didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the horizon. Somewhere out there, men who had killed his brother were still walking free, and the woman on his cot held the proof. He didn't know what came next, but one thing was certain. The past had ridden in on that storm, and it wasn't leaving quietly. The days that followed the storm blurred into a tense, quiet rhythm. Margot healed slowly. The graze on her shoulder knitted together under Colt's careful attention. Fresh bandages twice a day, broth laced with herbs he gathered from the sheltered side of the ridge, and rest she accepted only because her body gave her no choice. Colt kept his distance at first, speaking little beyond necessities, but the cabin was small, the winter long, and secrets have a way of filling silence. By the 3rd day she was sitting up, wrapped in one of his spare wool shirts that swallowed her frame. She watched him work, sharpening tools, mending tack, feeding the stove, and he felt her gaze like a brand. On the 4th evening, as the wind rattled the shutters again, she spoke first. You haven't asked why I waited 6 years to bring the letters. Colt paused, knife halfway through a strip of leather. Figured you'd tell me when you were ready. I was afraid. She traced the edge of the bandage with one finger. Not just of Gaines and his men, of what you might do if you read them. Asher said you were the steady one, the one who thought before acting. I needed to be sure you wouldn't ride off alone and get yourself killed before the truth could breathe. He set the knife down. And now? Now I'm sure. She met his eyes. Because you haven't looked at me like I'm the enemy. You've looked at me like I'm the last piece of him you have left. Colt exhaled through his nose, a sound that might have been a laugh or a curse. He rose, crossed to the small table where the oilcloth bundle lay untouched since that first night, and carried it to the fire. One by one he unfolded the letters. There were 7 in all. Asher's careful handwriting, some smudged with what might have been blood or rain. The cipher was simple to him now, the boyhood code sliding open like a lock he'd never forgotten. The picture they painted was ugly. Lieutenant Elias Gaines had been selling patrol routes to a loose confederation of rustlers and opportunists who called themselves the Iron Ring. For a cut of the profits, Gaines gave them the army's movements, the supply lines, the weak points. The ambush that killed Asher wasn't random. It was paid for. Asher had pieced it together from overheard conversations, missing payrolls, a coded telegram he'd intercepted. He'd written everything down, intending to take it to the provost marshal. He never got the chance. The final letter, dated 2 days before the canyon, was addressed directly to Colt. If you're reading this, brother, I didn't make it. Don't waste time on grief. Find Gaines. He's got a scar above the left eye and a taste for whiskey that costs more than a captain's pay. Last I heard, he was buying land near Laramie under the name Elias Grant. The proof is with Margot. She'll find you. Trust her like you trusted me. Colt folded the page, throat tight. He looked at Margot. He knew he was going to die. He suspected. He made me promise I'd disappear if anything happened. I kept that promise longer than I wanted to. Colt stood. We can't stay here forever. They'll come looking. I know. She rose too, steadier now. That's why we have to finish it. They planned through the night. Margot sketched what she remembered of Gaines's habits, his favorite saloon in Laramie, the men who rode with him, the way he always kept 2 bodyguards close. Colt cleaned and oiled his weapons, the Winchester, the Colt Army revolver he'd carried since the war, a spare shotgun he kept above the door. He packed saddlebags with hardtack, ammunition, and the letters sealed in oilcloth again. On the 7th morning, the sky cleared to a brittle blue. The snow had settled enough for travel. Colt saddled 2 horses, the sturdy bay he rode daily and a grey mare he'd kept for breeding stock. Margot insisted on riding, though her shoulder still ached. She wore one of his old coats, sleeves rolled, a scarf wound tight against the cold. They rode south toward Laramie, keeping to back trails, avoiding the main stage road. 3 days out, they camped in a stand of lodgepole pine. Over a small fire, Colt asked the question that had gnawed at him since she'd whispered Asher's name. Did you love him? Margot stared into the flames. I cared for him deeply. He was kind when kindness was rare. But no, not the way you mean. He spoke of you constantly, said you were the only family worth fighting for. Colt nodded once, accepting it. The silence afterward felt less heavy. They reached Laramie on a Saturday evening. The town smelled of coal smoke, whiskey, and wet horse. Gaines, now calling himself Elias Grant, owned a 2-story saloon on Front Street called the Silver Spur. Margot pointed it out from the alley where they'd tied the horses. He'll be upstairs, she said. Private room, poker most nights. Colt studied the building. Lanterns glowed behind lace curtains on the 2nd floor. 2 men lounged on the porch, big, armed, watching the street. We go in quiet. I'll handle Gaines. You watch the back stairs. She touched his arm. If it goes wrong, it won't. They waited until full dark. Colt slipped in through the kitchen door, moving past cooks and serving girls like a shadow. Margot took the narrow alley stairs. Inside, the saloon roared. Piano music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Colt climbed the rear staircase, boots silent on the worn boards. The private room door was ajar. Voices drifted out. Shipment leaves Cheyenne next week. Double the usual cut if you keep the patrols clear. Gaines's voice, smooth, confident. Colt knew it instantly from the day of the ambush, barking orders that led them straight into hell. He stepped inside. 3 men at the table. Gaines in the center, scar stark under the lamplight, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Cards scattered, whiskey bottles half empty. They looked up. Gaines smiled, slow and cold. Well, well. A ghost from the past. Colt's revolver was already in his hand. Asher sends his regards. The bodyguards reached for weapons. Colt fired twice, center mass for each. They dropped before they cleared leather. Gaines stayed seated, hands flat on the table. You're making a mistake, Remington. No, you made it 6 years ago. Colt pulled the bundle of letters from his coat and dropped them on the table. Read them, then tell me why my brother had to die. Gaines glanced at the pages, then back at Colt. You think this changes anything? The men I worked with are bigger than 1 dead lieutenant. They'll come for you. Maybe. Colt cocked the hammer. But they'll have to go through me first. Margot appeared in the doorway, a small derringer in her good hand. She'd come up the back way as planned. Her eyes were steady on Gaines. "Tell him," she said. "Tell him who paid you to sell the route that day." Gaines laughed once, bitter. "A colonel out of Fort Laramie. Name doesn't matter. He's dead now. Heart gave out 2 years back. You're chasing shadows, boy." Colt stepped closer. "Then the shadow ends here." He didn't shoot. Instead, he gathered the letters, tucked them away, and nodded to Margot. "Tie him." They bound Gaines to the chair with his own belt and a length of curtain cord. Margot found a ledger in the desk drawer. Records of payoffs, dates, amounts. Enough to bury him if they took it to the right people. They left him there, gagged with his own handkerchief, and slipped out the back. By morning the town would be buzzing. Word would reach the U.S. Marshal's office. The iron ring would fracture without Gaines's connections. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was close enough. They rode north again, not toward the ranch, but toward Cheyenne. Margot had contacts there, old army nurses who could get the ledger into honest hands. Colt didn't ask if she planned to stay or go. He didn't need to. On the third night of the return ride, they camped beside a frozen stream. The fire was low. Margot sat close enough that their shoulders touched. "What now?" she asked. Colt stared at the stars. "I think I'm done running from the past. Maybe I'll rebuild the herd. Maybe I'll find out who else was in on it, but I won't do it alone." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." He slipped an arm around her, careful of the healing wound. "Then stay." The fire popped. Somewhere an owl called. For the first time in 6 years, Colt felt the weight of grief lift. Just a little, just enough. Asher was gone. But the truth had come home. And so had something new, quiet, tentative, real. They rode into the ranch yard 3 days later as the sun rose gold over the snow. The cabin waited, smoke curling from the chimney where Colt had banked the fire before they left. Margot smiled at the sight. "Home," she said. Colt dismounted, offered her his hand. "Yeah, home." He helped her down. They stood together in the yard, watching their breath cloud in the cold air, 2 shadows merging into one against the brightening sky. The past had ridden in on a storm. But the future, they would build that themselves.